The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked up the long driveway to my daughter's house in Oakville, the late September wind carrying that particular Ontario bite that tells you winter isn't far off. I had a folder tucked under my arm, the kind lawyers use, stiff and cream-colored with the notary seal pressed into the corner. Inside that folder was a life I never thought I'd have. My brother Raymond, God rest his soul, had left me everything. A waterfront cottage on Lake Muskoka worth close to $3 million, 2 rental properties in downtown Toronto pulling in $18,000 a month, and a portfolio of blue-chip stocks that, last I checked, sat just north of $4.5 million. At 63 years old, after 41 years of driving long haul for Canadian Pacific, I was suddenly wealthier than I'd ever imagined a man like me could be. And the only person I wanted to tell was my daughter, Claire. I'd practiced the speech on the drive-in from my little bungalow in Oshawa. I was going to sit her down at that kitchen island she loved so much, slide the folder across the granite, and tell her that her old man had finally come into something, that she wouldn't have to worry about her mortgage anymore, that her boys, my grandsons Ethan and Cole, would have their university paid for. No student loans, no part-time jobs pulling them away from their studies, that she could quit that stressful marketing job she complained about every Sunday dinner, and maybe finally write that book she'd talked about since she was 17. I'd lost my wife, her mother, to pancreatic cancer 6 years ago. Since then, Claire was my whole world, and today, I was going to change hers. I was about to knock on the side door, the one that led into the mudroom off the kitchen, when I heard my son-in-law's voice through the screen. Marcus. My son-in-law Marcus, 41, worked in what he called financial consulting in Mississauga. Though near as I could tell, he mostly shuffled other people's money from one account to another and took a cut along the way. I'd never liked him, never trusted the way his eyes slid off mine when we shook hands. But Claire loved him, and the boys adored him, so I'd kept my mouth shut for 11 years. I was about to keep my mouth shut for another 11 seconds, which is how long it took to change everything. I'm telling you, Claire, the man is a walking liability. He's 63 years old with a pension that barely covers his groceries and a house that's worth what? $250 on a good day. He eats here 3 times a week. He's going to outlive us at this rate. My hand froze an inch from the screen door. Marcus, please. He's my father and I'm your husband, and I'm telling you, we need to think about this practically. My mother had lived through something eerily similar with her own father, and I remembered the strain it had placed on her, financially, emotionally, in ways that never quite healed. By the time my grandfather finally passed, the bills had piled so high they almost didn't feel real anymore. $80,000 had gone into home care alone, and that number lingered in my mind like a warning sign. $80,000. That kind of money could have paid for a full college education, covered years of opportunity. And now here we were again, circling the same conversation, only this time it was about my own father. He wasn't sick. That was the thing that made it harder to swallow. He was still strong, still stubborn, still capable of fixing things around his house better than most men half his age. But time had started to leave its fingerprints on him in quieter ways. He repeated stories sometimes, small details slipping through the cracks. He misplaced things, forgot moments. Not always, not enough to call it anything serious, but enough for someone like Marcus to notice and turn into something bigger. I pushed back when Marcus brought up the hockey tournament. I hadn't forgotten. I knew exactly what had happened. Cole had told me it was canceled, and I remembered the frustration of driving all the way out only to get that message halfway there. But Marcus didn't care about accuracy. He cared about building a case. He's getting older, I said. Exactly, he replied. Like that proved his point. Then came the plan. Of course there was a plan. Marcus always had a plan when there was something to gain. He had already done his research, already found a place. Maple Ridge Manor, somewhere in Peterborough. Affordable, he said. Shared rooms, but manageable. We'd sell my father's house, use the money for the entrance fee, and let the government handle the rest. He said it like it was neat, logical, responsible. But all I heard was something else entirely. You want to put my dad in a nursing home? I want to be realistic. That word, realistic, felt like a blade disguised as reason. He kept talking about how my father couldn't live alone forever, about how neither of us would want to deal with the hard parts when they came, about our lives, our careers, our kids, about how my father had already lived his life and now it was our turn. I remember the sound that came out of my daughter, soft, breaking, like she didn't want to be heard but couldn't stop it either. It cut through everything Marcus was saying, even if he pretended not to notice. He tried to soften it, to make it sound compassionate, but underneath it all was calculation. Even when he mentioned the power of attorney, it wasn't about protection, it was about control. He had already spoken to a lawyer, already laid the groundwork, already thinking steps ahead. And then he said something that changed everything. He doesn't have to agree. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I didn't make a sound when I stepped away. Didn't interrupt, didn't confront. I just walked back to my truck, sat behind the wheel, and let the weight of what I'd heard settle into something cold and steady. I had been through storms in my life, real ones. The kind that came with black ice and endless highways at 3 in the morning. I had buried people I loved. I had endured years of watching my wife fight a losing battle. I thought I understood anger. I didn't. What I felt then wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was something quieter, deeper, something that didn't rush. It waited. When I got home, I made coffee out of habit more than anything else. Sat at the table, opened the folder, looked at the numbers again. 7.9 million. It didn't feel like wealth. Not yet. It felt like leverage. They thought I was weak, that I was slipping, that I was something to manage, something to reduce, something to quietly move aside, so I let them believe it. For 3 weeks, I became exactly what Marcus expected to see. I leaned into every assumption, wore the same worn clothes, talked about small things like milk prices, asked questions I already knew the answers to, let my shoulders slump a little more, my voice soften just enough, and when I mentioned maybe selling the house, I saw it, the flash in his eyes. Not concern, not hesitation, hunger. He tried to dress it up, of course. Talked about safety, about comfort, about community. But underneath it, there was no mistaking what he wanted. Claire barely spoke during those dinners. She avoided my eyes, kept herself small, quiet. But once, just once, she looked at me. And in that moment, I saw it. Shame. That look told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't the architect of this. She was trapped inside it. And that realization changed the direction of everything. Marcus wasn't just wrong. He was dangerous. Not just to me, but to her, to the kids, to the life they were supposed to have. So I made a new plan. I found a real lawyer. Not someone local, not someone casual. Someone who understood how these things worked at a deeper level. I told her everything, every detail, every word I'd overheard. She listened carefully, then laid it out plainly. He couldn't force anything, not legally, not without proof of incapacity, which didn't exist. If he tried to fake documents, that crossed into criminal territory. And if I wanted to know what he was hiding, there were ways to find out. I didn't hesitate. The truth, when it came, was worse than I expected, and yet somehow exactly what I had anticipated. Debt piled on debt, lines of credit, loans taken out in Claire's name without her knowledge, a second mortgage she never signed, money lost chasing schemes, investigations already underway. He wasn't planning for the future. He was trying to escape the collapse of his present, and he had chosen me as the solution. I could have walked away then, let everything unravel on its own, let consequences catch up to him naturally. But that would have destroyed Claire, too. So I called him, told him I was ready. He couldn't hide his excitement no matter how hard he tried. We met, talked. He played his role. I played mine. Then I set the final condition. A lawyer, my lawyer. Everything done properly. He agreed. Of course he did. He thought he was winning. By the time we sat in that office, everything was already in place. The truth didn't need to be forced. It only needed to be revealed. And when it was, it didn't explode. It didn't create chaos. It simply collapsed everything he had built. Claire's reaction wasn't anger at first. It was something deeper, grief, shock. The slow realization that the life she thought she was living hadn't been real for a long time. When he reached for her, she pulled away like she finally understood who he was. That was the moment I knew she was going to be okay. Everything after that unfolded the way it needed to. Charges, consequences, separation, rebuilding. It wasn't quick. It wasn't easy, but it was clean. I made sure she had a place where nothing of him lingered, a home that felt safe again, somewhere the boys could grow without shadows hanging over them. I helped where I could, but I didn't take control. That part mattered. She had to rebuild her own voice, and she did. Slowly, steadily, she found herself again. The writing helped. I could see it in her. The way she talked about it, the way her eyes lit up in a way they hadn't in years. The boys adapted faster than I expected. Kids do that. They don't carry things the same way we do. One summer evening, sitting by the water, Cole asked me why I had never told anyone about the money. I thought about it, because the truth wasn't really about money. It was about timing, about understanding what mattered. I wasn't rich back then, I told him. He didn't understand, not fully, but one day he will, because wealth isn't always measured in numbers. Sometimes it's measured in the moment someone chooses what's right over what's easy. Sometimes it's measured in the strength to walk away from something broken and build something better. And sometimes it's measured in knowing exactly when to stay silent and when to finally speak. As for Marcus, I don't think about him much anymore. But if I'm being honest, I don't wish him peace. I hope he sits with what he did. I hope he understands it. Not because I need revenge, but because some lessons only matter if they're felt deeply enough to never be forgotten. Family, in the end, isn't something you take from. It's something you protect. And if someone forgets that, well, sometimes they have to learn the hard way.